come from Kansas City, a long way from home. Today I am going to be talking about apples and oranges, also brownies, cookies, and donuts. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I have been doing research in fMRI for the last several years. I came to Flux last year in Pittsburgh, loved it, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here today, speaking to all of you. I like to do my thank you acknowledgement slide at the very beginning. I've heard, we all have been to talks where the thank you slide is kind of rushed at the end, and this type of research truly takes a village, and so I love to acknowledge all my collaborators and my funding sources. So what I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to be talking about food, I'm going to be talking about fMRI, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the work that I've done looking at childhood obesity and the relationship between obesity and functional brain differences. And then I'm going to go into specifics on a study that we are just now finishing up, that is a food decision-making study, and then end with future directions. I want everybody to take a good long look at this. Think about the taste, think about the smell, the texture. We as neuroscientists can use images in a very evocative way to elicit motivational states in people, okay? So some of the paradigms, actually all the paradigms that I'm going to be talking about today use visual images to elicit these motivational states for people. Here's an example of a paradigm we've used time and time again. This is a simple passive viewing block design where we show appetizing pictures of food and then we show non-food. Now in the non-food animal condition, we have to make sure that the animals we show are in no way reminiscent of food. I mean, most of us, when we see cows out in the field, which is more common in Kansas than for some of you I know, but most of us don't think, steak, right? So when we piloted this outside the scanner to make sure that we had great stimuli, surprisingly, people kept rating dolphins as very appetizing. So we had to keep dolphins out of our non-food animal condition. Now we know, and this is a great, I was delighted to have Michael talk about reward regions and some of Deanna Barch's work with looking at candy and how this stimulates reward areas in the brain. We know that our brain is very involved in our decision to eat, when we eat, what we eat. We know that there are homeostatic mechanisms involved, like the hypothalamus, kind of those lower brain structures. And particularly interesting to me, we know that there are regions of the brain that are involved in our desire to eat, right? Most of us eat because we like it, right? So there's the need to eat, driven by these homeostatic mechanisms. Then there's the desire or the want to eat with these motivation and reward processing regions. And I'll be talking more about those as I go on. This picture is disturbing, but I like to include it. We know now from a body of literature that there are differences, functional brain differences, between obese individuals and healthy weight individuals. And I've been involved in work looking at adults and kids. Specifically looking at the kids, we know that when you compare obese children to healthy weight children with one of these passive food motivation paradigms, we see that even after they've eaten, obese children's brains stay active in a lot of these prefrontal regions, limbic, paralimbic regions. We see differences as well in the dorsal insula, which is involved in taste, and of course the reward processing regions. Related to that work, this is a study that I worked on just a couple of years ago, looking at how food logos, so symbols that are related to food but not actual images of food, how functional brain activity to these stimuli might differ between obese and healthy weight kids. And indeed, we showed that there was a difference when these children, obese versus healthy weight, were looking at pictures of food logos versus non-food logos. Now, when we started this study, I thought we would see obese children's brains light up greater than healthy weight children's brains in reward regions. That's not actually what we found. What we discovered was that all the kids' brains were lighting up in these reward processing regions. I jumped in the scanner when we were piloting this study, my brain lit up. Okay? These images of food logos are very, very salient to us, very rewarding. What we saw was that the healthy weight children's brains were lighting up more bilaterally in the inferior frontal gyrus, an area that we know to be associated with self-control, cognitive control, and regulation. So raises probably more questions than it answers, but raises some questions about the ethicality of food marketing to children who may be at a particular physiological vulnerability. If you've been to the grocery store lately to buy a box of cereal, you may recall a display, something like this, right? We are required to make many, many, many food decisions. And the options, the number of choices, are overwhelming. So as neuroscientists, we always like to get closer and closer, within the parameters that we can work within with fMRI to actual behavior. So this next study that I'm going to talk about is a decision study. So kids aren't just passively looking at images of food or non-food, or food logos or non-food logos. They're actually making food decisions while they're in the scanner. And I'm guessing many of you are familiar with neuroeconomics, which is a field that has developed a lot in the last 10 years, kind of merging behavioral decision science with economics and then neuroscience techniques. And so some of this that I'm going to show you is using some of these neuroeconomic methods to look and see what's going on when kids are making these food decisions. So as I said, I'm not just going to be talking about apples and oranges. I'm going to be talking about donuts and apples and brownies and apples. So when you're posed with a decision like this, there's lots to consider, right? I mean, from the very, very basic of visual attention, visual salience, processing of the stimuli. Think about memories that you have of last time you ate a donut, last time you ate an apple. You may think about food restrictions that you have. Is health important to you, or is taste important to you? If I threw price into this decision, it would become even that much more complicated. I have celiac, and I eat gluten-free. So this decision would be an easy decision for me. While I would love the taste of the donut, and I remember when I had donuts, that they are delicious, I would have to choose the apple. So there are many, many, many different aspects that go into making even a simple food decision. So the study that I'm going to be talking about in detail now is a study where we're asking children to make these food decisions while they're in the scanner. Up to this point, we have run 25 healthy children, not nearly as ambitious as scanning preschoolers. We are sticking to the 8 to 14 age range. And we have about half female, mean age is 10 years. Now, as many of you know, you get a lot of wiggly kids, so we've had to throw out data from 5 children. And the paradigm involves 60 single-item food images. Half are healthy foods, half are unhealthy foods. Here are some examples down here at the bottom. And outside the scanner, so before they even get in the scanner, we have them do a behavioral task where we ask them, how much do you prefer this food item? And they rate it on this 5-point scale. We also ask them how healthy do you believe this food item is? So we're getting health ratings. We're getting what the kids believe about the healthiness of these foods. We also get tastiness ratings. How tasty is this food to you? So we get all this information before we put them in the scanner. Now, once they're in the scanner, we ask them, how much do you want to eat this? They answer a series of 10 questions about how much do they want to eat this. Then the next block of questions is, how much does your mom want you to eat this? Now, we're also scanning the moms in this study. I'm not going to be presenting any of that data here today, but we're also collecting information on mom's taste ratings of foods, mom's healthiness ratings of foods, how much the mom, she herself likes the food, and then how much she wants her child to eat the food. So we're getting a ton of data, but today I'm just going to focus in on the preliminary results that we have from the kids. So looking at the basic contrast of my own food choices compared to what I think my mom wants me to eat, we have a nice activation here in bilateral ventromedial prefrontal cortex. And this is very consistent with past studies that have looked at kind of where we encode value, how much we value something, how much we like something in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. So this is just the basic contrast of when the kids are making their own choices versus when they're making choices they think their moms want them to eat. And this is a whole brain analysis. So this next result is looking at a parametric analysis. So we're taking the child's behavioral ratings of what they like in conjunction with the brain activation when they're making these choices. And again, we see activation in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Again, this is whole brain. Now, when we look at the child's own preference, again in this parametric analysis, with their mom's choices. Instead here, you don't see ventromedial prefrontal cortex, you see right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex in this whole brain analysis. As I said, we're just finishing data collection. We have a couple more mom-child dyads to run. But up to this point, it seems that our results so far are very consistent with previous studies looking at ventromedial prefrontal cortex as being very, very important for what we value, right? What we like. And then when these kids are asked to make this decision about what they think their moms want them to eat, kind of a theory of mind or a mentalizing task, this recruits dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which we know to be associated with deliberate decision making. So where do we go from here? Well, you saw that our age range is 8 to 14. There are a lot of developmental changes in between 8 and 14. So I'm hoping that we'll have enough power to look at some of these changes over the course of that 8 to 14 age range. We also collected pubertal status, so we'll be able to look at the influence of puberty on some of these decisions. As a clinical psychologist, I'm always looking for the clinical angle and the intervention angle. So I would like to see this, as I mentioned, these were healthy weight children. I would like to see how some of these activations differ between healthy weight children and obese children. And further, if a child goes through a lifestyle and obesity intervention, can we change some of these brain activations? Can we change behavioral choices and brain activations as well? We know that the brain does change with weight loss. Now, these are adult studies that I'm just briefly going to mention. Adults that underwent bariatric surgery, the laparoscopic banding surgery, pre-surgery to 12 weeks after surgery, their brains indeed change. My colleagues and I just published a study that compares two different types of weight loss interventions, and it appears that the way in which a person loses weight influences how his or her brain changes. So half of these adults had gone through the surgical weight loss procedure, half of them had gone through a change what you eat and exercise, a more behavioral intervention, and it indeed appears that, and here's some of the results from that study, that the adults that went through the behavioral diet intervention had increases, significantly more increases in medial prefrontal cortex, and this was back using that passive food motivation paradigm, than the bariatric participants. So I think that the ultimate question of chicken and egg, right? Are these brain changes present very early in life? I mean, does it go back to even in utero? And that predisposes a person then to have a disrupted energy balance and gain weight. Does the possession of excess weight change brain function? We need some longitudinal studies to be done to start answering these questions. So I think it's an exciting time for all of our area of research. And at this point, I would love to take any questions that you might have. This is my brain, so you can pick my brain now. Thank you. Hi.
So the ground truth would be what they actually eat, right? So you have to be diary data to figure out what they typically eat, or even an amazing world, like in the amazing addition to this, do you actually have data on them eating behavior in the lab? Would you plan to do that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I don't know if you heard the beginning of that. She asked about like real world eating behaviors and can we get that data. They choose a snack after their scan, so we know what they choose for that snack. We have a lot of behavioral measures on them as well. We didn't do food diaries. It's probably something that I wish we would have done for the future. But ultimately, I think having an eating behavior task in the lab would be
that's related to brain.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And do they only eat a meal before the scan?
No, they go in the scanner when they're pretty hungry.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
So they have to. I think 3 to 4 hours since they've last had a meal. So they're pretty hungry when they go in.
Great, really exciting research.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, very nice research. Thank you so much. I had a question. How domain specific do you think are these differences? Do you think these kids have general reward processing issues in other domains? I mean, food is a very special place for the kids, but if you have it with toys or other things, I was curious.
Right. So how generalizable is this to other types of decision making?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, we heard yesterday about delay discounting and the developmental changes with age. I think we're going to hear a talk next actually about delay discounting and how that changes in different samples. So I think to a degree it does generalize to other things. I mean, people have looked at the relationship between obesity and financial delay discounting. Do you discount the future value in other domains, not just kind of related to the food, or the substance of choice? So yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm going to ask Carrie Roche to come on down, and you can take one more question as you're transitioning. Are there any more questions?
Thanks.